When I go to departmental meetings, we usually have committees to decide on striking a task force to study the feasibility of having coffee in the faculty lounge.
Yeah.
So it'll take us 5 years of feasibility studies before we decide to have a $30 coffee machine. So
How's the coffee?
Not very good.
Hi, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Philosophyinsights. Upcoming is an absolutely great interview from Gad Saad on the herd mentality of academics and the refusal to challenge the woke mob. First, some background. Wokeness is often associated with leftist social policies, emphasizing social justice, identity politics, and equity-based initiatives. One of the most visible impacts of these movements in academia is the push for curriculum revisions that align with progressive ideologies. Campuses influenced by these movements have seen a rise in attempts to disinvite speakers who hold conservative views or simply views that are deemed outside of the progressive overtone window. Here is Saad.
Even in academia, I'm starting to see a growing number of academics very gently pulling their head out of the sand, but not at a speed that I would like them to, right? So, the monster is coming at you at 100 miles per hour and you're autocorrecting at 2 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fast enough autocorrection. So yes, there is some optimistic signals out there, but not fast enough.
Has the academic layer of all of this been the most shocking part of it to you, that so many of the academics that you work with, and I want to talk about Concordia specifically because you've got a serious headache on your hands over there, but that so many professors who are tenured and should not only be teaching the right things, I'm sort of past that point.
Yeah.
Let's say they're going to teach the wrong things, but at least still be able to stand up for some basic principles that we thought they believed in, that they have checked out too.
Yeah, so and this is not to be facetious, but I really I often argue that I discovered a new species. They're called academics, and they're defined by being invertebrate castrati.
Yeah.
Invertebrate because they have no spine, and castrati because they don't have any testicles, right? And it's really regrettable because you would think, as a tenured professor, there is an institutional mechanism that protects you precisely so that you can speak your mind, so that you can do the research that you...
It's quite literally the whole point of tenureship,
That's
right?
literally the whole point, right? You had Socrates who was executed. You had Galileo who was put under house arrest. We decided that we can't have academics not be able to engage in free thought. Therefore, we created a mechanism called tenure that says, I can't fire you unless you do ethical or moral or criminal breaches. I can never fire you for anything that you say or write. Well, that's great. So then why don't you speak?
Mm-hmm.
But what ends up happening is that most academics, first, they're extremely cowardly, perhaps in part because there is a self-selection bias against what I call intellectual Navy SEALs, right? I mean, Navy SEALs, you do pick them because they have to be brawny, they have to be courageous, they have to be athletic. In academia, we might pick people who are smart,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not intellectual honey badgers. They're quite timid, they're tepid, they weren't the jocks. I mean, I'm being a bit maybe hyperbolic, but they lack that combative nature.
But are you surprised that was across the board in our institutions? That it does, like, now there are some universities that are a little bit better, or at least aiming that way, Ralston College and
Yes.
University of Austin, but that virtually everybody in the Ivy League chose the timid one instead of going.
It doesn't surprise me because I've existed in that ecosystem my whole life, right? So when I go to departmental meetings, we usually have committees to decide on striking a task force to study the feasibility of having coffee in the faculty lounge.
Yeah.
So it'll take us 5 years of feasibility studies before we decide to have a $30 coffee machine. So
How's the coffee?
Not very good. So, it moves slowly. It's glacial speed. It's very, there's a lot of niceness. So people don't speak directly. So even if I want to disagree with you, I will preface it by saying, I hear your point. I hear you. There's kind of this infantilizing that takes place. And I'm a direct speaker. And so it's very, very difficult for me to, in a sense, exist in that ecosystem because it goes against my most fundamental disposition.
Many professors are deterred by the fear of social ostracism. The human propensity to maintain social harmony often overrides the drive to stand against what they might privately disapprove of. The risk of losing professional opportunities or facing punitive measures from university administrations heavily influences the decision to remain silent. This phenomenon is exacerbated by the mechanisms of academic hiring, which often favors ideological conformity. One should also not underestimate the increasing influence of student activism on campus politics and its role in shaping the academic discourse. Professors often find themselves navigating a complex web of student expectations and activist demands, which can lead to self-censorship. Currently, the campus protests put academia significantly on hold.
You live in Montreal. I mean, I'm seeing these protests, they're pretty intense there. You have a government backed by Trudeau that certainly is not going to do anything to curb any of this. I would say actually is fueling an awful lot of it. I mean, just personally, for someone that cares about happiness and family and all that as much as you do, like it's not easy. And you don't have the easiest family history,
exactly.
and life biography.
I'll give you an example that just happened about 2 weeks ago. We were talking earlier about Inter Miami and our common friend Jorge Mas. Well, he was kind enough to send me tickets for Inter Miami had come to Montreal to play a game. He couldn't make it, and so I took my family to the game as a beautiful gift from him. As we were driving to get to the stadium, we crossed about a 6 to 8 block area where it was impossible for you to know whether it was in Raqqa, Syria, whether it was in Yemen, whether it was in Pakistan. It was just an endless sea of what looked like very hostile protesters and demonstrators and so on. And I remember that I sort of tried to put the visor so that people don't see me, because I was worried, what if someone recognizes me and they have... So that's the reality. Now, it didn't take long, right? I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I was already warning people that this was coming. Well, now we're there. What if I was just walking with my family and they recognized me? Who knows what would have happened to me?
Right. I drove by one when I did the R conference in London. That was late November.
Right.
And I had the same exact thought, which was, if I get recognized right now, I don't know, do they literally just ransack the car? Like, what the hell happens?
Another hot topic is censorship on social media. Bias against conservative users have been a recurring issue, particularly account suspensions, shadow bans, or permanent bans. More covert is the use of fact-checking and labeling. While the surface aim is to curb the spread of false information, these tools are disproportionately used against views deviating from the mainstream narrative.
You know, I'm careful not to blame social media too much, because like most things, it can be used for good or bad. The number of connections that I have made through social media, common, you and I, Jorge Mas, the owner of Inter Miami, is reaching out. Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, my all-time favorite soul singer from the 1970s,
I remember.
Lead singer of the Stylistics.
Yeah.
How am I hanging around with this guy in Philadelphia when he was singing in my ears when I was 12 years old? So
no, I know. I've met basically anyone I ever wanted to meet in my life because of Twitter and the internet.
Exactly. So you can't, it's a tool that can be used for great nefarious purposes, or it can spread great ideas and cause people who are like-minded to connect. So it depends how you use it.
But do you think that there's the weird thing, I think, right now, is that one side knows how to really use it.
That's true.
For the negativity. And as Jordan would talk about, Jordan Peterson, they're fueled largely by narcissism and have been fed all the wrong ideas. And now these guys, they didn't grow up with these tools. So that is a bit of the...
So they didn't grow up with those tools. And to my earlier point, they're invertebrate castrati, right? So you just go boo, and then they say, okay, whatever you want. I will completely fold. I will completely acquiesce, because there is nothing more threatening to me than, I'm speaking as them now, than having a bunch of, rabid maniacs coming at me. Whereas my personality is, when you come after me, it only emboldens me. It only makes me angrier. I double down on everything. I remember at one point, I don't know if you saw this thing, Valerie Bertinelli came after me.
Valerie Bertinelli, 70s sitcom star.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm a bit older than you, but so here's what had happened. I had posted a tweet meant to demonstrate how lovely and sweet my wife is, and that we were at a cafe, and she went to order from the barista. The barista looked like they were a non-gender, two-spirit, whatever. And so when she came back to me, she said, I felt uncomfortable because I didn't know how to address them, and I didn't want to make a mistake and hurt them. So I tweeted that as a demonstration of how lovely my wife is,
right.
that she doesn't want to hurt.
She was sensitive.
She was sensitive. So like you would think that the Pink Coalition or whatever they call it, would be erecting statues of my wife.
Right, right.
So that was flipped into Gad Saad talks about how his wife was so threatened by the trans thing. So for the next 2-3 days, 20 million of these guys, all spearheaded by this Valerie Bertinelli, come after me. Well, now, if I didn't have a strong personhood, I wilt. I troll more. I hid under my desk. I did self-flagellation. And guess what? Yeah. They go away because they feel as though you're untouchable, like nothing that they can say. But those administrators that you're speaking about don't have that ability, and therefore...
Isn't that a bizarre thing if you would have said in 1978, boy, Valerie Bertinelli is going to go after me on this thing called Twitter one day. I had it doesn't even matter who, there was a former NBA coach who was going after me one day a couple of years ago. A guy who I think it was Jeff Van Gundy or it was Stan Van Gundy, one of them, like he was coach of the Knicks or something. And I was just like, this is so insane. I spent 20 years watching this guy coach and all the basketball that I've ever watched. And now this guy's basically calling me racist or something to that effect. Like you can't make this stuff up. But that's the weird reality that we're in right now.
Indeed. But I mean, to our earlier point, I wake up every day and I can't believe how fortunate I am that I had the type of personality that didn't make me be a stay-in-your-lane professor. So that's actually a tension, which I talk about in the happiness book, hyper-specialization versus being a generalist, right? Academia teaches you to be a stay-in-your-lane hyper-specialist. Know a lot about a very, very small thing, make your mark there and never deviate. Kind of like the horse with the, is it the blinkers they're called?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that you can never look sideways, right? Whereas I don't have that temperament, right? I want to sample everything in life. So my research demonstrates that. I publish in medicine and psychology and evolutionary theory and marketing and politics. I just go wherever a problem interests me. When I started doing public engagement and going on the Joe Rogan and so on, all my academic colleagues would, what are you talking to Joe Rogan with? Who talks to such a guy? I'm like, he's got 20 million. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't you be promoting such outreach? And so the fact that I have this kind of polymath approach to life, and hence that's why, by the way, I love Leonardo da Vinci, because he's the ultimate Renaissance man. He did it all. Allowed me to meet people glorious like you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe and hit the bell.